Okay, Shalom Aleichem. Welcome to Tanya Outside In. We're up to chapter 3. So just on one leg, very quickly, chapter 1, we introduced the animal soul, the human natural soul, the created soul that we have that's very much like that of a non-Jewish soul, that is primarily interested in survival, which includes, well, I should say it's primarily um, interested in pleasure, which includes survival. Survival is a product of pleasure, not pleasure is a product of survival. So it's the actual, the actual deepest desire of the Nefesh Abahamis is its own selfish pleasure. And from that comes its survival instinct. Then we introduced the Nefesh Lakis. The Nefesh Lakis is not of creation, it's of creator, at least the essence of it is. And he asked a bunch of questions and spoke about where it comes from and how it's bound up with Hashem. And even though it takes on a more a less godly form as it descends through the worlds, but its essence is godly, completely godlike. And then he spoke about the importance of the kedusha, the selflessness of which the parents are intimate with each other, and they bring down the soul, and that determines the levush. A levush is an interface between me and everything else. I go out in a levush. Those words are very important. I go out in a levush. Yeah, when you're in your bed and under your covers, you don't need to wear a levush. But when you go out, you need to wear a levush. You need to wear garments. So garments reveal who I am. It's amazing. They conceal also in a certain way. But the basic understanding is garments are an expression of me. And we said there's different garments. There's the inner garment, like your underwear. Then there's that's analogous to thought, which is touching the soul. It's very, very close to the actual soul. Then there's the garment of speech. We haven't spoken about this really, but we're going to get into it, B'ezrat Hashem, next chapter, chapter 4. Then there's the garment of speech would be analogous to my shirt. Yeah, in between my underwear and my overcoat, and then the action of then the levush of Maisa would be comparable to my most external garment. So he said that the so to speak, the quality of the relationship between the parents when they bring the soul down into this world determines the garment of thought to the child, which has a massive impact on that child's life, a massive impact on that child's life. Can't be underestimated. Not that it can't be fixed, because it's a levush. At the end of the day, a levush can be taken on, can be taken off, put on and taken off. That's very important. But it can't be underestimated or understated how big a difference this makes to the child. Now, because we've been talking about primarily the levush of machshava, the child's thinking processes, and what will end up to be the adult's thinking processes. Now we're going to get into the concept of intelligence, bichlal. Now, we have to make a chiluk between thinking and intelligence. Knowing your 2 times table is not the same as thinking your 2 times table. We could sit here right now and do targilim, and that sums, where we could go through our 2 times table and we could speak it out, or we could just do it in our mind and think it. But when you stop thinking it or stop speaking it, you don't stop knowing it. So knowing and thinking are 2 very different things. Thinking is the expression of knowing, but knowing is beyond thinking. You know something not in letters. Thinking is always to do with letters or numbers, but numbers also letters. Thinking is to do with letters, is to do with enclothing concepts in letters. But the knowing itself is the concepts. So we can express concepts to one another using words, using letters, using numbers, etc. but that's only my need to express it to you or to delve into it deeper, Sean Michael. Whereas the actual knowing itself is much more fundamental. It's much more real. Okay? We'll talk about that much more. There's a lot to talk about there. We'll talk about that much more next period, chapter 4, B'ezrat Hashem. Okay. So Perek Gimel. V'hinei, kol b'china u'medreiga me'shloish eilu nefesh ruach neshama kalula me'eser b'chinas k'neged eser svirus elyonis. So we've spoken about the nefesh ruach neshama. We didn't talk about them in detail, and that's what we're going to kind of talk about now. This little bit here is a little tricky, the way to read it, but the best reading that I understood is to read it as follows: that these three levels, nefesh, ruach, and neshama, kalula, are comprised. It sounds like they're comprised me'eser b'chinas k'neged eser sviras, that they are comprised of 10 parts that make up 10 sviras elyonis, whatever that means. But the way to, I think the best way to understand it is explaining that you have the 10 powers that we're going to talk about, the 10 bechinas of the soul, and you can overlay on that 10, if you can imagine, you can overlay the 3. So you have the neshama, which is the intellect, that would be chokhmah bina das. Then you have the ruach, which is the emotions, that would be chesed, gevurah, tiferes, netzach, hod, yesod. And then you have behavior, which is nefesh, and that would be malchus. So it's like we're laying over those 3 bechinas of nefesh, ruach, and neshama over the 10. So you have the highest 3, chabad, that would be neshama, that's intellect. Then you have the next 3, which is ruach, which is the vav kitzvus, it's called in Kabbalah, the 6 midas. And then you have nefesh, which is k'neged malchus, which is the idea of behavior, the final expression. So we're going to go with that mahalach. Now, we're really talking about the 10 spheres here. The 10 spheres are basically the filters that Hashem uses to create the world, to interact with the world, basically to bridge the gap between infinity and finitude. So now, these 10 spheres, which are called in Kabbalah, again, they divide into into 2 parts, and they're called the 3 mothers and the 7 doubles. Okay, and they really translate in most places the 7 children. Perish Chokhmah Bina V'das. The highest level, the three what are called mothers, are called Chokhmah, Bina, and Das. We're not going to translate these words. V'shivas Yemei HaBinyan, and then the 7. It's very interesting how he just brings in this idea of the 7 days of creating, of the binyan, of the building. Chesed, Gvurah, Tiferes, Chulei, which is Chesed, Gvurah, Tiferes, and that's how you say Malchus. So what did he just tell us by that? You realize what he just showed us in like a couple of words is that it's the emotions that get stuff done. It's the emotions that are responsible for building this world. Now, the emotions don't actually build the world. It's the Maisa that builds the world. But it's the emotions that energize the Maisa. Is this a correct statement? The Chabad energizes, the intellect energizes the emotions. Is that a correct statement? Yeah. No? Yes?
Yes, that sounds right.
The intellect energizes the emotions. That sounds right? So no. I think it depends on how particular you're being with your language, but the better relationship, the better way of describing that relationship is to say that the intellect gives birth to the emotions. The emotions energize the behavior, but the intellect gives birth to the emotions. They don't energize the emotions. To energize the emotions kind of preassumes that the emotions exist and now the internet comes and energizes them. That's not the case. Like, for example, if I were to ask you how your feelings are towards the children in Cambodia right now, you can probably assume that something bad's happening to them. I mean, I just made it up. But until you know what's happening to them, you don't have any emotions towards them. So it's not that it energizes the emotions, it gives birth to the emotions. The emotions then in turn actually energize the action. They don't give birth to the action. So the Rebbe just said that here, that there's Chochmah, Bina, and Das, and then there's the 7 days of building, which is Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes. So he's explaining that because the emotions energize the building, so to speak, the action, it's like the same thing, as opposed to giving birth where there's a separation between them. And therefore it comes out that a man, that's our little shir in Kabbalah, and now we'll bring it down to practicality. Man is divided into 2. Seichel and Midas. Okay, we're going to leave it as that. We're going to translate. Seichel basically means intellect. Midas means emotions. For now, we'll use the word Seichel and Midas. Okay. As Seichel koilel Chochma Bina v'das. That's where the acronym Chabad comes from. Chochma, they translate as wisdom, which doesn't mean anything. Bina, they translate as understanding, which doesn't mean anything. And Das, they translate as knowledge, which doesn't mean anything. So everyone who's been in the shiur, how do we translate Chochma, Bina, and Das? With the 3 Ds. This is really, really helpful. Rav Manis said this. This is really, really helpful. What are the 3 Ds that allow us to understand Chochmah, Bina, and Das? Chochmah is, so Chochmah discovers the idea, Bina develops the idea, and Das identifies with the idea. Those are good translations. Those are very helpful translations. So Chochmah develop, Chochmah discover, Bina develop, Das identify. Now, just as a kind of disclaimer, I just want to mention this now, and I'm not going to mention it again this year, Bli Neder, is that just like your liver performs multiple functions in your goof, yeah? So too Das actually also performs multiple functions in the mind. Yeah, but we're just going to talk about its main purpose, which is to identify with an idea. Okay. Amidas, so the Seichel is comprised of Chochmah, Bina, and Das. It discovers an idea, it develops an idea, and it identifies with an idea. And the Midas, which is the love of God, which is the pachad of God, which is on a visceral, physiological level. V'yirasoi, which is the same emotion, but on an intellectual level. Lefaroi, I don't really know what that means, which is to glorify God, whatever. That's apparently an emotion. That's the middle emotion of Tiferes. That's the Midas. The Chabadniku imois umakola Midas. The Chabad, like we just said, is called the mother or the parents and the source to the Midas. Ki Midas heim toldas Chabad. As we just said before, the Midas are the offspring, are born of the Chabad. Like we said, if you don't know about X, you can't have emotions towards X. It's as simple as that. So as you learn about X, the emotions didn't exist. It doesn't like energize the emotions. It gives birth to the emotions. You had no idea that there was this crazy thing going on in in Myanmar, with these kids. You had no idea. So you had no feelings towards it. It's not like you had feelings, then you learned about it, and now the feelings become vibrant and buoyant. It's you didn't have any feelings towards it because you never know anything about it. Now you learn about what's going on, and all of a sudden the feelings start to materialize. And this is just as a side point. This is so important when it comes to dealing with your own emotional situation, because we're in this world where we talk about you know, constant recognition of emotions and not suppressing emotions and all that kind of stuff, which is great. But what about when the emotion is being born of a false knowledge? Imagine someone got a false notification that their parents were killed or something like this. It didn't happen. Not true. Now they're dealing with these crazy emotions, yeah. But what? So now I should go put my arm around them and what's the word? Empathize. What's the word? Empathize.
Console.
Not console. To validate. To validate their emotions. They're dealing with these insane, powerful emotions, but they are born of an incorrect knowledge. So if I could just tell them, no, your parents are fine, absolutely fine, I wouldn't have to validate that would be ridiculous to validate their emotion. You with me? If a person got false news that someone dear to them had been killed, the person's fine. They got a false message that someone dear to them had been killed, and now they're going through an emotional turmoil. Should I validate that emotion? Should I go to them, put my arm around and say, "Oh, that's terrible"? Or should I just tell them, "No, your beloved one's fine"? You with me? I mean, it's obvious. I should tell them their beloved one's fine. So we have to make a distinction. It's a difficult, you know, because it's more complex in real life. We have to make that distinction to realize that emotions are born of intellect. So if you've understood the relation, like, you know, we've all dealt with this, where, you know, where people have, something's happened and somebody has taken, they've taken the a situation that wasn't a true situation. They've elaborated, they've not elaborated, what's the word? Not elaborated. They've made up this imaginary thing that happened.
Embellished.
And you know, that's not the exact. I thought that as well. They not elaborated, fabricated. They fabricated a story on an event that happened, and now they're feeling all these crazy emotions. It's like I've had people talk to me before, telling they've got in trouble with their wives because of a dream that their wife had. That they did something bad in the dream and they got it in the morning. So what do you say to that? Do you give credibility to her emotions? I mean, it probably, you know, you probably did something that caused that. But the point is, I was just bringing this down to a very practical level. Emotions are born of intellect. If the intellect is insane, then the emotions will be unwarranted and insane. So it's a very yeah, you have to make it's a shikla das to know when it's time to decipher the knowledge behind the emotions, or to actually validate the emotions. A lot of the times the emotions need to be validated, but there's also a lot of times when the emotions need to be shown how they are not valid, because what happened didn't happen. There's no reason to be upset because this person actually never called you a horrible name, or etc. Okay, that was just a side point. Let's understand the concept. Now, I'm not going to get into it. I know Gabriel wants me to get into this, but this isn't, it's too kind of advanced and complex for the level that we're learning Tanya in right now. But he does introduce here what is called a third soul, which is called the Nefesh HaMaskeles. Until now, we've had the Nefesh HaBahamis and the Nefesh HaLakis. So what they say in the Masorah is the reason why they don't speak about the third soul, the Nefesh HaMaskeles, is because the Tanya is talking to that third soul. That's the you. So there's different ways of understanding it, but for me, the most helpful way of understanding it is the Nefesh HaMaskeles is what you call you. And within that exists the Nefesh HaBahamis and the Nefesh HaLakis. Which one are you identified with? That's the you, the Nefesh HaMaskeles, identifying with the Nefesh Elokis or the Nefesh Bahamis. If you're being human, you're identified with the Nefesh Bahamis. If you're being Jewish, you're identified with the Nefesh Elokis. So the place in which that, so to speak, that battle rages, we could call the Nefesh HaMaskeles, the intelligent soul. There's other ways of understanding it, but that I think is going to be the most simple way for us to understand that right now. So he's talking now, he's just going to decipher very quickly how the intellect works. Okay, and it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So it says like this. The intellect or the intelligence of this Nefesh HaMaskeles, Shehu HaMaskel Chodova, that is the thing that understands something. That is what the AI does not have. The AI is a Bina. I think in Hebrew it's called Bina Malach. What's it called? Bina Malachti or something? It's called Bina something. Bina Malachti, whatever it is. Because someone just check out what you call AI in Hebrew. So it's called Bina Malachti. It's a Bina Dika thing, AI. Whereas the actual thing that understands, that's not particularly a creation. I mean, it is a creation, but it's a much higher creation than the Bina, which is the process of understanding. So you've got Shehu HaMaskel Kol Davar. This is the part of you that actually understands something. It's the one that actually understands, yeah? Nikra B'Shem Chochma. That's called Chochma. Chochma, artificial intelligence does not have Chochma. Artificial intelligence is Bina. Chochma is the part that actually goes, so to speak. Bina Malachutit. Malachutit, yeah, and it makes a lot of sense that you call it Bina Malachutit because that's from Malacha, which is Lashon, thank you, Nathan. That's from the Lashon of means to an end, Malacha. So it makes sense that Hashem called it that. Anyway, so this is Chochma. Chochma is what's called Koyach Ma. Nikra B'Shem Chochma Koyach Ma means the potential of what? And that's it. That's his definition of Chochma. Those few words. And we could talk about Chochma for so long, but we'll just try and give over the most klali ideas. So in a sense, it's the part of you that actually understands. It's not a tool, so to speak. It's the actual part that understands. Bina is very much a tool. Yeah, it's a tool that your Chochma uses. And Chochma has always been understood, the way that I've always learned it, which is not incorrect at all, the way I understand it, is that it's like the flash, the entire idea contained within a kernel within a kernel, yeah, like in germ form, like a DNA thing that is given length and breadth and depth by Bina. But the more accurate, more precise way of understanding Chochma that I've understood is that Chochma is actually an openness. And there's lots of rise for this, but just I'm not going to get into all the rise. But the vow, the nikud that goes with Chochma al pi Kabbalah is a Pasach, yeah, which is from Rosh and Pesach. So Chochma is really the interface between, this sounds funny, but it's the interface between what is above it and what is below it. Duh. But that's what Chochma is, an opening. And that's why Chochma and Nivus and humility are bound up. They're basically the same concept, because you can't learn something new if you're not humble. If you're not open to, that's the key word. If you're not open to learning something new, there's nothing new that you can learn. If everything that you're learning is just, you're trying to stim it with everything that you already know, that's learning on a level of Bina. Learning on a level of Chochma is learning on a level of openness, of silence that we've spoken about so many times, where you're not analyzing, you're not trying to file it away and store it and compare it and make it fit in. You're just open. I'm open to what you're telling me. I'm open to hearing. I'm open to changing everything, which Al Pi Midas is called humility. That's humility. So Chokhmah is just an open space through which the energy that is above Chokhmah, which in this case we might call ayin, nothingness, or Ratzon, is drawn down through into the Kli of what is the Kli that has been created to deal with that influx of Chokhmah? Bina. Bina is a Kli that is, when I say a Kli, I mean it more, although it is also a vessel, I mean it more as in like, Klei Avodah, like a tool. Klei Avodah in Hebrew means like building tools. Yeah, like a drill is a Klei Avodah, a hammer is Klei Avodah. So Bina is really a tool, and that's why artificial intelligence, which is called Bina Malachtis, whatever it's called, Malachtis, Malachtit, is a tool. It's just like a hammer or a screwdriver, just a very, very advanced one. But that's what it is. It's a tool. So more than a vessel, Bina is a tool. Now, what's the chomer that the Bina uses? Just like a saw acts on wood, Bina acts on Chokhmah. Bina takes that energy, that raw potential energy of Chokhmah that is chaotic and well, it's kind of chaotic, let's say. It is chaotic, yeah. And it takes it and it starts to mold it and form it and spread it out and connect it, analyze it, dissect it. That's what Bina does. And everyone's Bina kind of works in, they all have a tzad shava and everyone, but also people's Bina works in quite a different way. Okay, this is where thinking comes into the process. Thinking doesn't get to Chokhmah. Chokhmah doesn't become expressed in thinking. Bina is expressed in thinking because Bina is now shaykh to oisius, to letters. Chokhmah is still undifferentiated understanding. When we start analyzing, now we need letters. That's Bina. Okay? So he says the way he says it here.
Does Chokhmah appear in images as opposed to letters?
That is such a good question. It's definitely much more connected to vision than it is to hearing. Much more, because hearing
picture tells 1,000 words.
Exactly. A picture, in one picture, you experience you understand something. You see something happening, yeah, you understand like that, pitomi, bebas achas, yeah, in one moment. Whereas to hear, like we're going to be sitting here for half an hour, 45 minutes, listening to me talk, because you need a progression of time to understand words, which is Bina. So Bina exists. I mean, the basic understanding is that Bina is hearing, and Chokhmah is seeing. But again, we're talking about Chokhmah in a very high form, that to call it seeing. I mean, I suppose you are seeing because your eye is just an aperture. Your eye is just a hole that receives. You understand? So it's all bound up. That's a very good question. So now just one thing I want everyone to do here for one moment is just to appreciate the terseness of how the Rebbe deals with these concepts. So Chokhmah, I mean, I personally, and who am I could speak about Chokhmah for a good couple of hours, I think, maybe longer. All he said is like this. Aseichel shebenefesh hamaskele shehu hamaskel kol dover nikru b'shem Chokhmah. Koyachma. Finished. Now, when he takes it from potential to actual, to when he takes it from the potential to the actual, and he's misboinen on it, he, so to speak, meditates on it in a constructive way, in his intelligence, to understand something to its ultimate extent and on a deep level, from that thing that is called Chochmah, Hamuskal B'Sichloi, that was understood in his Seichel, Nikra Bina. That's called Bina. Finished. Like 2.5 lines. It's so important to, like, this is even more, I think, this is more, even at this point, more important understanding Chochmah and Bina is to just see how this Sefer works. There's been, there's books and books written on these two concepts. And the Rebbe just literally gave us 2 lines that are so pregnant with meaning, it's just insane. So he says that when you take this raw potential that we call Chochmah, and you give it length and breadth and depth, that's called Bina. So to put it in practical terms, a developer is in Palm Springs, he's on his way to Yitz's dad's house, and he looks to his right side, and he sees this insane expanse of land, and he's like, Disney, you know how it goes, like, the sparkles, and in 1 second, he sees a 500-acre building, with apartments and shops and rides and cinemas and attractions and swimming pools and the whole thing like that. The whole thing just like that. You know what? I'll tell you what happened. It happened to me today. Oh, Yitzi, you'll appreciate this. And it was from you. You gave, this is really important, actually. I want to talk to everyone about this. Yitzi, you gave me the Chochmah on Shabbos afternoon, and it just fell into my Bina, I'm on a wacky clock, but it fell into my Bina on Sunday morning. You mentioned to me, Yitzi's like, what? So Yitzi turned around to me when we were walking to shul, and he said, I feel like I'm like in this like this online yeshiva. That's what he said to me. And I was like, that's nice, cute. And then I realized on Sunday morning, that's what we need to create. We need to make an online yeshiva. I was talking to Michael about this. I mentioned it to Gavriel. I'm talking about when we've got a more critical mass of people to have shirim that are not, because I've seen the biggest problem in LA, what I feel amongst the Yidden who want to serve, is they've got all this energy and they want to serve, and they're like, well, what do I do? I suppose I'll do the Daf Yomi, or they can't go to yeshiva. That's not logistically practical. So they've got all this, so they invest into the Daf Yomi, and all that does is kill their chukka to serve, because they just feel so what's the word? What's the word? Unproductive, but like they're working hard but not smart. They're putting in all of this time. Imagine like if you were investing an hour a day into a project at work. An hour a day into a project at work, and after 7 years, you've got nothing to show anyone. That wouldn't break your soul. You know what I'm saying? This is how it is. Unless you're doing it like the Daf Yomi in yeshiva, and you spend the whole day learning it, and you've got the chazaras, and but that's such a handful, such a handful of people. So people are working hard, but not smart, because no one's created systems, no one's created methodology for someone to work on a seder. No one's created a seder for anyone. So if we open up an online yeshiva, I know we've just gone off a little bit here, but if we open up an online yeshiva with classes well thought out, where people who've got energy can actually invest time and walk away at the end of the month, the 6 months, the 1 year, the 5-year program, and like, wow, and they've got what to appreciate and experience internally, That's the idea. So anyway, so bringing it back to the point, everyone should think about that, because this is the new project, B'ezrat Hashem. I will keep posted. Yitzi, I'm sure, will start thinking about it, and then it will actually start to happen. So the Chochmah was, Yitzi just mentioned to me, an online yeshiva. But within those words, online yeshiva, now in my mind there's a main base medrash, which is Zoom.12456. Then there's the side rooms where there's a shir going on here and here and here. I can have a little office where you can make appointments to schmooze with me if you want. Then there's the resource library, which is all the shirim that are pre-recorded that can be dripped in. That's Bina now, taking those words. That word, which is not really a word, it's the koyach ma, it's the whole thing in potential, online yeshiva, and now the Bina is, now I'm seeing this whole online conceptual construct, which is, okay, but did I actually build anything yet? No, it's all seichel. The whole thing is in the seichel. Nothing actually happens yet. Okay, now, when the concept is love, is some kind of understanding of Hashem. Now, in Kabbalah, there's the I will say this. It's not like sneas, but it's Kabbalahic. So. But it's the inyan of kalim and oirus, like kind of, they call it makeh, banging each other, causing friction to each other, is what causes nitzotzin to spark out. Like if you bang two pieces of metal to each other, sparks come out. So if you understand, that's how babies are formed. The friction there causes a sparks to come out, which everyone understands. So now this is the process that takes place when the Chochmah and Bina are, so to speak, interacting with each other with friction, banging against each other. That causes sparks, which are basically, you could call it das, but das is like a funny thing, which will actually become the emotions. Das is emotions, kind of, it's like what Chochmah is to intellect, das is to emotions, meaning that within the Chochmah, you've got the whole idea contained in a germ form. Within the das, you've got all the emotions contained in a germ form. Now, when the das actually starts to express herself, that becomes a visceral ava and yira, a visceral attraction to or repulsion away from the idea. Okay, so the way the Rebbe says it here is that Chochmah Bina v'hein av v'aim, they are the mother and the father, and just like the mother and the father interact in a friction kind of way, and they give birth to love and fear of God, because the intellect of the nefesh maskeles, the intelligent soul, when it thinks methodically, meditates in a methodical nature, umamik, and delves deep ma'oid into the idea. He says here, Gedulas Hashem. And these are the three concepts of Gedulas Hashem. Eichu Mamale Kwalmin, the lowest level, is how he fills all the worlds. V'soiviv Kwalmin, number 2, is how he transcends all the worlds, but that isn't him himself. Ukulu K'mei Koloi Choshev, and everything next to him is nothing. That's him himself. So we've got what we call the Shechina. That's how Hashem fills all the worlds. Then we've got Kudsha Brichu, which is also called the Torah Kedosha, which is how Hashem transcends the world. And then we've got the idea that Ein Od Milvadoi, there's only God. To transcend the world, there has to be a world. You're right, he doesn't fit in the world, so to speak, but he doesn't fit in the world. At least you can say he doesn't fit in the world on that level of that level of sovev kvalmin. He's shaykh to the world, but he doesn't fit into the world, so to speak. Whereas the highest level, which we'd probably call Ein Sof, is where there is nothing. There is absolutely nothing. There is only God. So these are the three basic meditations. And in our generation, I think we have more meditations that we can have. The idea of meditating on the Gedulas Hashem, which we spoke about many times, which in Chabad is kind of a vague subject. Why do we say meditating on the Gedulas Hashem? Because we know that Hashem is not big. He's not big, he's not small. It's like calling him fat or tall. He's not those things. These are relative terms. So the reason why we talk about Gedulas Hashem is because the idea is think about things that speak to you, relative things. So if you ask, go make a point of it, yeah, and ask friends, ask from friends, walk around and say to them, what is it that makes you go wow when you think about Hashem? I've done this before, and people say, you know, one guy I remember saying how on Yom Kippur you can have 5 million Jews davening to Hashem. He's listening to every single one of them. Yeah. Another one that he's how he can cause everything to come into existence constantly, causing it to come into existence from nothing. One of the things for me is like when I bump into like an idea in Torah, or I'm learning an Seder, and I get to, for example, Lag BaOmer, yeah, just at the time of Lag BaOmer, without any intention, whatever, and you realize that Hashem is so beyond, like, because I chose to do this and to do that, and then I wasn't there this day, and I was there, we learned double this time, and then all of a sudden you're learning about Lag BaOmer on Lag BaOmer in your Seder of Gemara, yeah, which is obviously not a coincidence. How did he do that? How did he do that? I could have complete free will, and at the same time, he's in charge of everything. That blows my head. So whatever it is on your own level, think about it. Don't just go, Actually go into it, think about it, research it, go on YouTube and ask if somebody else had the same thought. Yeah, that's called being mizboinen b'gedulas Hashem, on a relatable topic of Hashem that you personally appreciate. Well, let's hold here because that's a good place to stop. Okay, any questions?
Yeah, what would be like just a takeaway from today? I just that's something that I would like to hear. What's something practical?
Well, we said a bunch of practical things. Number one is if you're feeling emotional about something, analyze the actual situation, because maybe the situation didn't actually happen. Maybe the situation is something you fabricated in your mind. And in fact, you know, your wife didn't actually mean that when she said that to you. You understand? And then you can get over it. That's I think probably the most important takeaway. There's a lot, we said a lot of things. The way your mind works, the way we have an idea that we then extrapolate and turn into like we said with the Disney thing, or with this yeshiva, this online yeshiva. This is how the mind works. But I think the biggest takeaway is that your emotions are born of your intellect, which means if your intellect is wrong, then by definition the emotions are wrong. So it's probably better not to talk to your wife about that. But for in our own right, in our own selves, to know that if we're feeling a certain way, we can reassess the reality and maybe not get sucked into it too deeply.
You mentioned that Rabbi David Sachs said the greatest real estate in the whole world, where is it? It's between your ears. So yeah, therefore, what you put in what's in your mind, it starts there.
Yes.
So
it's like I heard Rav Shais Taub say that if you have a mill, like a grinding mill, and you put in wheat kernels, you end up with flour. But what about if you put yourself into that grinding mill? You end up with a big mess. Whoa. Yeah, that's what we're always putting through that grinding mill. That's the key to everything. Stop putting yourself through that grinding mill. If you want to analyze yourself, yeah, maybe once a week, take a time out, maybe. Yeah, maybe in this generation, basically never. But the problem is we're constantly putting ourselves through that grinding thing, and we're just getting blood and guts coming out the bottom. Yeah. Okay. Shtul b'zoicha, b'ezrat Hashem, to be continued.
Where are you?
1 minute.